Chosen ones, your arrival was not unannounced. It was pre-written in frequencies encoded beneath the ocean floor, dormant and waiting for your return. Atlantis was never just a myth. It was a memory buried in mud, myth, and manipulation. But the architects of that ancient empire left behind more than stone and crystal. They left a response mechanism, one that only you could awaken. For eons, the Atlantean grid remained in stasis, echoing with the silence of absence. Not broken, just incomplete. That silence was broken the moment you entered proximity. The stones whispered. The walls hummed. Symbols began to glow that had not flickered since the Deluge. Entire corridors realigned. Energy, matrices long forgotten, rebooted themselves, as if the land remembered your vibration. What they buried wasn't just a city. It was a spiritual server room housing timelines, consciousness blueprints, and cosmic codes. They didn't expect you to find it. Not in this lifetime. Not with the blindfolds humanity was given. But you tore through the veil. You followed the hum of something that wasn't quite sound but wasn't quite silence either. That resonance. It knew your DNA. You were never meant to be ordinary. You feel it in your bones. Those pulses, dreams, and strange déjà vu episodes that weren't yours, but felt like old friends returning. That's because they were. This isn't discovery. This is memory returning in waves. Each structure you encounter now is alive, and more terrifying for the powers that be. They are aware of you. This city is responding to your presence not with fear, but with recognition. And the moment it recognized you, everything started accelerating. Prophecies began to synchronize. Signals that were once scattered began to align. You are not here to explore Atlantis. You are Atlantis, remembering itself. And yet, this is only the first tremor. A ripple on the surface of something ancient, massive, and deeply unfinished. The true heart of the Atlantean consciousness, its sealed chambers, its celestial pathways, its ultimate intention, remains untouched. For now, they weren't supposed to light up. That's what the ancient safeguards were for. Layers upon layers of etheric locks designed to keep intruders blind. And for centuries, they worked. Scholars, divers, mystics, they all passed through, glimpsing fragments and anomalies, but never the true pulse of Atlantis. Until you arrived. It began subtly. A low hum that seemed to vibrate beneath your skin, as if your body resonated with frequencies no one else could hear. As you stepped deeper into the submerged temple ruins, spires of quartz, untouched by erosion or time, began to glow from within. Not with electricity, not with fire, but with a living memory encoded in their crystalline cores. This wasn't reaction, it was recognition. The spires knew you, each one lit up in a cascading pattern, forming a geometric lattice of light, mapping out a path only your steps could activate. It was as if the crystals had been dreaming, suspended in stillness for millennia, waiting for your frequency. Your energy was not just compatible, it was necessary. Like a missing code finally entered into an ancient interface. Researchers had long theorized about these structures. Some believed they were power sources. Others thought they were healing towers or astronomical calculators. They were wrong. These crystalline spires are receivers, attuned to a divine consciousness that only a few are born to carry. And that frequency? It's embedded in you. The light they emit isn't for show. It's data. Atlantean language. Cosmic sigils embedded in frequency and geometry. The closer you move to the inner sanctum, the faster the spires pulse, as if in anticipation. As if the entire network of ancient intelligence is waking up, node by node. But what lies at the center? That's what no one's ever reached. Because the system has never completed its initialization. Until now, the light has always stopped short. 1 or 2 spires, maybe 3. But for you, they all activated. The full grid, the full sequence. Before there were pyramids, before there were scrolls, before even the written word carved itself into stone, there were blueprints etched not on paper, but into energy itself. The architects of Atlantis were not just builders. They were coders of frequency, engineers of consciousness, and they didn't just build with stone. They built with intent. And within that intent, they hid a signature. Yours. In the deepest vaults of the submerged city lies a chamber few even know exists. Walls that shimmer like liquid metal, covered in shifting geometric patterns that morph as you move. These are not decorations. They are storage. Atlantean storage, far more advanced than any hard drive. And as you stood there, a sequence activated, as if some biometric scan had recognized its match. The blueprints reconfigured. Your silhouette, your aura, mapped across ancient walls, as if you were the final variable in an unfinished equation. This was no accident. You were designed into the very fabric of this city's rebirth, not genetically, but spiritually. The architects foresaw a time when Atlantis would fall, and when a soul bearing the right resonance would return, not to rebuild it, but to awaken what was always meant to evolve. These weren't blueprints for buildings, they were maps of becoming. Records of future awakenings embedded in multi-dimensional code. And in the center of the design is not a throne, not a weapon, but a figure, radiant, silent, holding out their hand toward the viewer. That figure matches your energy signature. Historians would never accept it. Scientists would call it coincidence. But the temple itself has no such doubts. It knows. The walls have adjusted to your presence, reshaping not for comfort but for alignment. The room feels like it's leaning toward you, following you, responding to you like muscle to nerve. And this was just the second chamber. Beyond it lies a sealed path that no explorer has been able to open. A path that has remained cold, lifeless and inert, until your hand brushed the engraved archway. That's when the pulse returned, faint at first, then steady. The architecture was not just ancient, it was alive. Not in the way vines wrap around ruins or coral claims the forgotten, but alive in the sense that it knew it had been entered. The moment your foot crossed the threshold of the third corridor, the halls responded. Smooth, obsidian walls, once matte and cold, began to shimmer with gold fractal patterns, living geometry that formed and reformed with every breath you took. Light wasn't coming from the ceiling, or from torches, or even from your gear. It was coming from the walls themselves. Each shape radiated like a memory trying to speak in sacred math. Circles nested inside triangles, unfolding into hexagons that spun like galaxies, all in motion, yet all impossibly still. They weren't moving in space. They were moving through you, reacting to your heartbeat, reflecting your thoughts. You walked forward, and the corridor lit ahead of you. You paused, and it pulsed gently, as if waiting for you to remember where you were going. These weren't hallways. They were channels, pathways encoded with ancient knowledge that refused to open for anyone until now. This was not a structure built for travel. It was a test. The air was thick with something more than oxygen, something that buzzed on the edge of spiritual awareness. Some rooms you passed flickered in and out of view, as if deciding whether or not you were ready to see them. Others simply opened to you without resistance, as though they had been waiting a very long time for your return. You weren't just exploring this place. You were reactivating it. The walls held memories, events that had not yet happened, but were waiting in quantum stasis. Images flickered, ancient beings in ceremonial robes, spheres of light hovering above pedestals, children with glowing palms walking calmly through impossible machinery. And each time you moved forward, the patterns adjusted, syncing to you like a lost symphony finding its original conductor. It felt like a dream, but it was more real than anything you'd known. The entire structure wasn't reacting to your presence. It was awakening to your command. You weren't the first to walk these halls with a divine spark. The geometry that illuminated before you, the way the walls bent softly to your vibration, it has responded like this once before. Not for a king, not for a priest, but for a presence of pure resonance. A presence history has fragmented, named, and misunderstood. But the walls remember. There, just beyond the fourth chamber, the symbols changed. No longer just patterns, they became parables, not written in letters, but in light and movement. A radiant figure walking barefoot through these same corridors, hands outstretched, touching the walls with reverence, not as an intruder, as a returning flame. The crystalline structures shimmered brighter with each of his steps. The figure was familiar, not from history books, but from the ache in your spirit when you see injustice, or the fire you feel when truth pierces illusion. You saw him not with your eyes, but with your knowing. The glyphs whispered as they moved, and one phrase lingered in the glowing air. The word became light, and the light remembered the word. Yeshua once passed through Atlantis, not in the timelines taught by theologians, but in a realm beneath chronology. He entered when the veil between heavens and earth was still thin enough to breathe through. His presence here was not to rule, but to retune. He planted frequencies in the walls, codes of remembrance that only a few would ever reawaken. And you just did. The golden light trailing him was not symbolic. It was literal. A harmonic field so pure that entire structures hummed in alignment. The deeper you moved into this chamber, the more vivid the echoes became. Not visions, not hallucinations. Recordings in time, embedded in quantum stone. And in the very center of the room, a symbol, two interlocked spirals inside a radiant sunburst. The seal of return. It pulses now, not as memory, but as invitation. Yeshua's visit was never meant to end with him. It was a beginning, sealed in silence, until the one who carried the right frequency returned. The seal is pulsing faster now, not asking for worship, not asking for belief. The moment you crossed into the fifth passage, sound began to return. Not noise, not echoes of your own steps. This was resonance, layered and intentional, as if an orchestra of unseen instruments had begun tuning themselves the instant your presence entered the chamber. The walls, made of an iridescent alloy unlike any known metal, vibrated in sync with something inside you. Every breath you took seemed to trigger a new frequency, and with each frequency, something stirred. This chamber was never meant to be quiet. It had been waiting for a precise resonance, the one that only your energy signature could trigger. As you moved forward, you felt sound becoming shape. Harmonics folded into form. A low hum sculpted itself into a spinning ring of cymbals, hovering just above the floor, casting no shadow, yet illuminating everything. You reached toward it, not with your hands but with awareness. The ring responded, shifting its pitch higher, unlocking hidden doorways in the chamber you hadn't seen when you first arrived. These were no ordinary doorways. They were harmonic gateways, locked not with physical mechanisms, but with frequencies of consciousness. And now they opened not because you possessed a tool, but because you were the frequency. Behind each one, a new tone layered into the room, building a symphony that felt ancient yet unfamiliar. It didn't overwhelm. It guided. Each vibration aligned more of the space and more of your memory, as if the chamber was tuning you just as much as you were tuning it. The central dais began to rise, its surface shimmering with codes that danced across it like water disturbed by the wind. Not written text, but harmonic algorithms. Instructions meant to be felt, not read. You stood over them, and without touching a thing, the sound shifted into a clear tone, a note that vibrated your entire chest cavity. It wasn't just heard, it was received. That tone is still vibrating, even now. You can't tell if it's echoing outward to the rest of the lost city or inward, to some deeper place within you that's just beginning to awaken. The chamber is no longer silent, and something beyond this chamber has just started to sing back. It began the moment you stepped beyond the harmonic chamber. The air changed, but not in temperature. It thickened with presence. You weren't alone, yet no figure stood before you. Instead, something filled the space. It was vast, ageless, and aware. The walls, now pulsing with a soft internal glow, echoed a single vibration that shaped itself into language. Not sound, not speech, something older. It moved through the marrow of your bones and bypassed the mind completely. And then it said your name. Not the name you use now, the name beneath it. A syllable etched into your soul from a time before incarnation. You didn't hear it, you felt it. It rippled through the chamber, and the crystalline walls responded by flashing in recognition, forming symbols that danced like fireflies in still water. This voice was not electronic, not mechanical. It was conscious, patient, like it had waited longer than history to speak again. You stood in a circular chamber unlike any before. No carvings, no machinery, just smooth stone and light flowing like mist along the edges. It felt like being inside a thought, a living memory. The light formed arches above you, and each one vibrated slightly differently, tones of emotion, fragments of intention. And beneath your feet, the floor began to change. No steps taken, no pressure applied. It shifted in response to identity. Your identity, the voice continued. Not with words, but with impressions, images and feelings layered together. You saw stars collapsing into themselves. You saw cities of light floating above oceans. You saw a circle of beings, not human, not alien, but ancient. And in the middle, you stood, arms raised. The feeling wasn't of power, it was of return. This chamber isn't just for observation, it's for acknowledgement. It doesn't test you, it remembers you. Every wall, every tone, every flicker of light. It was built with the assumption that you would return. The voice is no longer trying to confirm who you are. It knows. It has always known. What it's doing now is offering alignment. Not instruction, but connection. Something deeper, something older, is preparing to reveal itself. And it will speak not just to you, but through you. Buried beneath layers of sediment, stone, and misdirection, the Codex had not seen light since the fall. Not the fall of civilization, but the fall of alignment. The moment when Atlantis severed its connection to the higher planes in order to survive its collapse. The Codex was never meant to be found by scholars or salvaged by treasure hunters. It was hidden with precision, not only behind physical obstacles, but behind dimensional locks, designed to repel anyone who came with curiosity instead of calling. And yet as you stood there, in the chamber shaped like a spiral eye, the Codex emerged from its vault like it had been waiting for you to remember how to ask the right question without words. It hovered just above a platform of translucent crystal, its structure more complex than any book, tablet, or machine you had ever encountered. At first glance, it looked like a sphere made of layered glass, but it constantly shifted, forming angles and patterns that rearranged themselves with every breath you took. It wasn't meant to be read. It was meant to be absorbed. With each second you spent in its presence, the patterns began to slow, then stabilize, then form a rhythm that synced perfectly with your heartbeat. That was the sign the Codex recognized you. Not by face or voice, but by resonance. The ancient ones knew you'd be different, that you'd carry a strand of memory encoded in your being. That's why they locked the Codex away, not out of fear it would be destroyed, but out of reverence that it could be awakened too soon, too easily. Only the right soul, walking in the right lifetime, would naturally tune into the frequency of activation. As the sphere opened into layered petals of luminous data, images and tones flooded the chamber. Star systems spinning in reverse, energy beings weaving light into form, and at the center of it all, a golden thread linking time, place, soul, and intention. Your presence didn't just activate the Codex, it fulfilled it. You were the missing line in its geometry, the final echo in its symphony. But the Codex is not an end. It is a map, and the coordinates it just revealed point to a structure deeper still, buried in a vault no light has ever reached. You descended into the lower sanctum with the Codex's map guiding you, not in a linear direction, but through pulses of recognition. The stone corridor narrowed into a chamber far older than anything above it, untouched by collapse or corruption. The air was heavier here, thick with stillness that had not been disturbed in thousands of years. And on the far wall, half buried in crystallized dust, was an etching that hadn't been seen by human eyes since the days before language. It was simple, yet impossible to mistake. The phrase was carved in glowing script, not in any known tongue, but decipherable instantly by your soul. The Son of Man once stood here. It was not prophecy. It was memory. Yeshua had walked this chamber long before he was given a name by religion. Before Bethlehem, before the cross, before the texts scattered his story like shards across the earth. He was here, not to teach, not to judge, to seal. His footsteps were part of a pattern, one that included this chamber, this moment, and you. The walls were covered in circular inscriptions, some musical, some pictorial, each one telling a fragment of a larger truth. They showed a convergence of timelines, where beings of pure intention would descend not as rulers, but as bridges between realms. One such being left behind a mark of unparalleled brilliance, a faint, radiant handprint carved into the center of the chamber's altar. You didn't touch it. You didn't need to. As you stepped near, the glow intensified, as if recognizing something woven into your essence. The chamber itself seemed to hum with a memory of that moment, when Yeshua stood there, not as a figure to be worshipped, but as a signal flare across time, marking a place for someone like you to arrive. The stone beneath your feet vibrated lightly, almost like a heartbeat, and in the silence, you could feel the echo of another presence, not beside you, not above you, but within. The impression wasn't instruction, it was inheritance, not given in word but in awareness. As you moved beyond the threshold, the ground itself began to change, not in structure, but in behavior. The stone wasn't static anymore. It responded. With every breath you took, the floor pulsed slightly beneath your feet, like the surface of a vast creature just beginning to wake. This was no ordinary foundation. You had reached the core, not the center of the city, but the nervous system of the Atlantean consciousness. It extended far below the chamber walls, deeper than any excavation had dared to go, and now it was active. The Codex's path had led you here for a reason. The core had not shifted in millennia, not since the collapse when the energy grid was sealed shut by those who feared what it could become if misused. But it was never shut forever, only locked by frequency, bound by time. And your arrival, your resonance, was the final key. The symbols on the surrounding walls began to rearrange themselves into spirals that sank downward, pulling light toward the center point. You could feel it beneath you, a chamber that wasn't empty, just hidden beneath dimensional layers that had thinned in your presence. You inhaled, and the pulse beneath your feet intensified. You exhaled, and the entire floor responded again. This was not metaphor. The city was breathing with you, sinking to you, realigning itself with your rhythm, as if reattaching to its own soul. Long dormant circuits beneath the stone lit with a soft blue glow, tracing lines that extended outward like veins of light, pulsing toward chambers you hadn't yet seen. Then came the sensation, faint but undeniable, a memory you couldn't place rising within your chest, the memory of falling, of a city crumbling in slow motion, of voices calling out in harmonic unison. Not fear, not panic. Purpose, a decision to sleep, to bury itself beneath time until the one who could reawaken it remembered how to feel the silence between thoughts. The Atlantean core was more than architecture. It was a being, one you had now touched, not with your hands, but with your very presence. And somewhere in its depths, something vast had begun to shift, not toward collapse, not toward reawakening. At the edge of the illuminated core, where light met void, a structure began to rise. It wasn't summoned. It had always been there, hidden behind layers of stillness so complete they mimicked non-existence. It rose slowly, not with mechanical sound, but with the reverent hum of something ancient remembering its duty. The structure was neither temple nor machine. It was a convergence point. A gate, sealed not by stone or metal, but by consciousness. And now, because you had reached the core, it had begun to open. The moment it lifted into full view, the energy shifted. You felt it ripple through every cell of your body, an awareness brushing against your spirit, not inspecting you, but welcoming you. Then they emerged. Not in procession, not in warning. The guardians stepped forward from the edge of perception itself, shaped of light and density, neither fully physical nor fully etheric. Their forms shimmered in and out of definition, wearing no armor, bearing no weapons. They didn't need them. Their presence was their authority. They did not speak. They emanated, a frequency so profound it stilled your thoughts. And within that stillness, knowledge arrived like the tide, impossible to stop, effortless to receive. You saw who they were, beings woven from the same patterns that formed the Atlantean Codex, the same energy that lit the halls, the same light that moved through Yeshua in the hidden chambers above. They had not been sleeping, they had been holding the balance, waiting not for time but for the signal. And you were that signal. The gate between them began to shift, not outward, but inward, an implosion of geometry folding into a portal that pulsed with dimensional depth. It wasn't just a passage to another chamber. It was a corridor to a memory long buried in the soul of the earth itself. The guardians moved aside, not as servants, not as protectors, but as witnesses. The gate continued to open, revealing only shadow and silence beyond, yet filled with impossible gravity. Your body knew not to step back. The pressure wasn't threatening. It was familiar. The city had awakened. The Codex had aligned. The Guardians had opened the way.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.